Strap yourself in. We're doing Lions back rows. We might be here for some time. This is really, really hard. There's all the videos of the other positions so far, front row, second row, and those were hard enough, but back row is on another level. And let me remind you first of what I pointed out on one of yesterday's videos about the composition of Warren Gatland's squad. He said he's going to be 36 players. I don't know if that will change. Maybe it'll be 37 or 38. That would certainly make some of these decisions easier. But that is slimming down the squad slightly from where it was in 2017 going to New Zealand when Warren Gatland took 40. And in the back row, he took 7 players. I'm going to assume that he's going to trim that by 1. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going with 6. And important, just following on from the locks yesterday, important to point out that several of the guys, well, a couple certainly, Maro Itoje and Tyg Byrne, are legitimate back row potential players. But onto the back row, because there are so many potential options, I've broken this down country by country. And kind of in X Factor style, I'm going to try and eliminate some and send some through to the next stage, to boot camp, if you will. So here we go. For England, Tom Curry, Mark Wilson, Sam Simmons, the bolter, not in the actual international squad. The others were in Eddie Jones's international squad. Sam Underhill, Ben Earl, Billy Vunipola. Now, none of these England back rows particularly covered themselves in glory, with the exception of Tom Curry, who is genuinely world-class in the back row right now. Sam Underhill has been recovering from injury, hasn't really had the opportunity to show the kind of form he showed a couple of years ago when, well, at the World Cup, Sam Underhill and Tom Curry, Cunderhill, what was it Eddie Jones called them? The Bash Brothers or some, I can't remember exactly what he called them, Bash Brothers, I think. And yeah, they were outstanding. Sam Underhill may miss out due to the injuries he's had. Mark Wilson, look at the shape of the guy. What a specimen. He's absolutely incredible. And Ben Earl. It's Billy Vunipola and Sam Simmons is the choice. Can you take both? Can you accommodate both? Well, for the purpose of this process of getting through to the next round, the answer to that is yes. Because I think these 4 are contenders for a spot on the plane to South Africa, with Ben Earl and Mark Wilson being the 2 that drop out as we move on to Ireland. Again, so many back row options. And they just seem to have this unbelievable production line of young talent, particularly coming through in Leinster. So you've got a couple of Munstermen, old stagers, with plenty of caps under their belt and a lot of experience in Peter O'Mahony and CJ Stander. I mean, what a way to go out this would be for CJ Stander if he makes it to South Africa. And then you've got Caelan Doris, Josh van der Fleer, Jack Conan, and Will Connors. I mean, when you even consider that due to injury, I haven't considered Dan Levy for this, who was one of the best back rows on earth just a couple of years ago. It's quite a phenomenal amount of talent. And again, as you look to go through to the next stage, it's absolutely no criticism of these players because they are all excellent. And many of them have very good Six Nations. However, those are the 3 I take forward. The 2 old stagers and Jack Conan, who I think if you're looking for a number 8 option, he was outstanding in the Six Nations. And I think on form, one of the best back rows in the British Isles and Ireland collectively. So on to Scotland, who have less options, I see it, for the potential plane to South Africa. Hamish Watson, Jamie Ritchie and Matt Fagerson. And I think Hamish Watson is the only realistic contender for one of the 6 spots in the back row that Warren Gatland can pick from, purely, as I say, because of the competition for spots. Moving on to Wales. Aaron Wainwright, Talupe Faletau, Justin Tipperick, Josh Navidi and Ross Moriarty. Moriarty was on the last Lions tour, a really abrasive guy. Has kind of been overtaken in the pecking order, partly due to injury and partly due to the just outstanding emergence of Aaron Wainwright and the form of Josh Navidi, with Tipperick and Faletau having been, well, veterans of Lions tours in the past. And when I look at the shake-up to potentially make the plane, it is those 3. I mean, Tipperick and Faletau, I think that was an easy pick. Josh Navidi maybe is the one that is a bit of a surprise when you consider he didn't start the first Six Nations game for Wales. Dan Lydiate began the game, got injured very early on, unfortunately for him. But fortunately for Josh Navidi, who has absolutely taken his chance with both hands and had an outstanding Six Nations Championship, a really important cog in that Wales Championship effort. And as a result, is in the mix as we, well, before we move on to who makes it, I've just taken two people out of the discussions because I think these two are on the plane. So long as they're fit, they're going, because they are the two best back rowers available to Warren Gatland, and as I see it, will be starters in a test series, fitness permitting. Talupe Faletau and Tom Curry are world-class back rows, and I can't see there will be many arguments on that front, which means there are 4 spots left between these 9 players. What options? And what I've tried to do, I know several of them play in multiple positions. Josh Navidi and CJ Stander, for example, can play across the back row. Peter Omani can play flank on both sides. Sam Underhill can as well. But what I've tried to do is, if you see the top line is 6-ish type players, the middle row is 7s, and the bottom line is number 8s. And I thought that might help in terms of deliberations. And when you look at that top line, CJ Stander has come back into form. His story pulls at the heartstrings a bit. He is one of the loveliest men I've ever met. We met him at the World Rugby Awards in Monaco a few years ago. We went out there to do some interviews for the podcast, and he was genuine. I think it's hard to call because there's so many lovely people in rugby. CJ Stander might be the nicest guy that I've ever met out of the people that are players in rugby, and considering the level he's operated at for this long, what a guy to take on tour, and a story going back to his homeland of South Africa, having retired from international rugby. There's just something about that just makes that want to be the case. And I do think when you look at those 3 on the top line, there is one that, as fantastic a player as he is, and as important a leader and a character as he is, I do think Peter Omani is the one that misses out of those 3. Remember, we've got to whittle these 9 down to 4. Moving on to the middle line, and again, I think purely just because of injury, and I wouldn't have said this a year or 2 years ago, but I think Sam Underhill drops below Hamish Watson and Justin Tipperick in that pecking order, particularly when you think Sam Underhill's versatility to be able to play at 6 isn't so important when you've got Tide Byrne that I've already selected in the second rows. Maro Itoje can play there, and CJ Stander and Josh Navidi. I think Sam Underhill misses out. And then we move on to the number 8 position. And, well, this is where it gets very interesting. I mean, and this is why so many people, when you see them, on Twitter or just chatting and stuff, they sort of go, oh, yeah, Hamish Watson's got to go. CJ Stander's got to go. Sam Simmonds has got to go. It's so easy to say, but by saying one person's got to go, you've got to say to several others, you're not going. And it's so difficult. So it's really easy just to go, yeah, Sam Simmonds is playing really well in club rugby. Well, Hamish Watson's playing amazingly well in international rugby. Jack Conan tearing it up on the international stage. And what's really interesting in that one is Exeter Chiefs played Leinster not so long ago. Sam Simmonds was anonymous in that game, and Jack Conan was massive. And this is where it gets interesting, because Sam Simmonds, when he did play for England, and this is a few years ago now, and he has been outstanding at club level, and rightly so, has been lauded for that. But when he played international rugby, he had a great game against Italy, and then was treated relatively speaking, like a bit of a ragdoll against France because they had a massive pack. South Africa are even bigger. And that's where you've got to consider these things. However, in terms of moving on to the next stage, I actually think Billy Vunipola drops out. He hasn't shown the form that he's shown in the past. I think a fit and firing Billy Vunipola starts for the British and Irish Lions. I think on the basis of what he's seen, he hasn't done enough to justify jumping ahead of Jack Conan. And Warren Gatland's clearly been having a good old look at Sam Simmonds, and rightly so on club form. If you get the right balance in the back row, I think if you have Sam Simmonds in your back row, you have to have massive flankers, and it might adjust who you pick. So there you go. We've got down to 6 from 9. Still got to get rid of 2 more. And it's so hard. It's so hard to do. Well, what I've come down on is deciding that because you've already got Tom Curry as a 7, you've already got Tide Byrne selected as a lock come 6, and Maro Itoje, who can play 6 as well. You don't need 2 more 7s. as I see it. Tom Curry nailed on starter for 7 for me. Therefore, you don't need 2 more out-and-out 7s in a 36-man squad. So one of those 2 will be going for me. And because CJ Stander can play number 8, Josh Navidi can play across the back row as well. I don't think you need 2 more number 8s, because your third number 8 can come from Stander or Navidi for a midweek game, let's say. So one of those 2 on the bottom row is going to go. So I'm taking Stander and Navidi, Tipperick and Simmons. As outstanding as Jack Conan has been, and he really has, I don't know, there's just something about the X factor. And like I say, you have got the size on the flanks potentially. If you imagine Tom Curry as a 7 and Tyg Burn as a 6, then I think you might have enough balance to include the explosive nature of Sam Simmons. And also what you've got to consider is the impact off the bench. And Sam Simmons potentially with 60 minutes to go, tired South African defences and a bit of explosive power from the bench. I think that could be absolute dynamite. That was so hard to do. But there are the 6 back rows I have selected for the tour to the British and Irish Lions. One of the the form players in the Six Nations, Talupe Faletau, Tom Curry, Josh Navidi, CJ Stander because of the character he brings, his versatility as a player and a bit of romance thrown in. Justin Tipperick because he's just class. And Sam Simmons, the X Factor bolter. There you go. I do think, by the way, that the starting back row in a test series, if everyone is fit, although this can change, Talupe Faletau number 8, Tom Curry number 7, and Tyg Burn at 6. Right. Crikey, I need a break after that. I'm going to go and get a brew, and I'll see you on the next video.